What is fatherhood? This is the kind of question that people look at and think, that's for philosophers to debate, not for me to answer. Maybe it's the kind of question that you just assume you'll never find an answer on. It's just something that's to be debated, something that everyone has to have an opinion on. But I think every question has an answer. And hopefully, by the end of this video, if you keep this question in the back of your mind, we'll get a little bit closer to that answer. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has a lot to say about fatherhood. It's one of the main themes of the part. It's always been crazy to me how part 7 manages to have multiple core themes that all interlock and supplement each other. It's very dense, and I really love it for that. But Steel Ball Run doesn't just discuss fatherhood in general. It puts a spotlight on how fatherhood affects child development. We have 4 characters that I want to look at from the part that are significantly impacted by their parental figures. First, we have Gyro Zeppeli. His father, a very stern man, all about the family. I could describe his father as being respectful, but no emotional attachment to his children. Of course, as we know, his father is against any kind of sentimentality. He's against any kind of worldly attachment in a sense. It's only about his job, getting his work done, and doing the job that his family has always done. He has to fulfill his role, and he can't do anything else. It's all about the family and the job. It reminds me almost of the fathers in the real world who will choose work over family. Because even though Gyro's father is always talking about family and how this is the family business and all that, it's really choosing work over family. Because if he really chose family over work, he wouldn't be so against his son not wanting to be an executioner. To Gyro's dad, the obligation to the family business, so to speak, is where you can find happiness. And he tries to impart that into Gyro. But like most kids who grow up in a very stern environment like that, they just become very rebellious. They don't want to be a part of that system. They want to live their own lives and make their own decisions, decide what they want to be. And so often, just from rebellious instinct, they'll try to do the very opposite of what their parents want them to do. So Gyro kind of became the opposite of his father. He became very emotionally attached to his friend Johnny, but is always seen as a pretty disrespectful kind of guy. Whether it be the swearing or just how mean he is to people around him. He's not the most respectful person around, not like his father anyway. Next we have Johnny Joestar, the main character of part 7. His father was so taken over by horse riding. It was all he thought about, all he cared about. All he wanted his sons to do was be great horse riders. And his son Nicholas, shout out to having my name in a JoJo part, too bad he died immediately. But his son Nicholas ends up dying, like I just said, and that just destroys his father. And it erupts in a part where he tells his son Johnny that he wishes God would have taken him instead of Nicholas. Again, this is something that happens in real life. There are parents who have a favorite child, and if that favorite child is taken from them, then they can be very cold and cruel to the other child. I describe Johnny's father as emotionally abusive, but repentant. He drives Johnny into what a lot of people see as depression, which Johnny has to deal with for the rest of the part. But as we know, at the end of the part, Johnny's dad apologizes. Not directly to Johnny. Maybe that happens after the part. I'd like to think that it does. But he runs up and pushes through the crowd as Johnny is racing to try and get first place in the steel ball run. And he just says, I was wrong and I'm sorry. And that by no means rectifies what he did or how he treated Johnny. But we can't just simply dismiss it either. Next we have Diego, with the worst father probably out of any of the characters in the part that I can think of off the top of my head. His father, Dario, didn't want to have a child, so he forced I think it was girlfriend, I don't think they were married, to literally throw try and bury Diego into the riverbank to like murder him. Again, this is something that really does happen. There are parents who don't want a child and then try to murder that child so that they don't have to have it. Kind of a big deal. Although, thanks to fate, I suppose, Diego gets taken away by the river instead of dying in it. So maybe kind of analogous to Moses in a sense. His mother jumps into the river after Diego, and then the two of them live without the father figure. Diego, as you can understand, is very embittered by this treatment by his father. And then the person who kind of became a father figure ended up trying to like rape his mom. So Diego was a character who had very, very terrible male influences in his life, adult male influences. This is to differentiate him from Johnny, but also compare the two in a sense. On one hand, it shows that Johnny's upbringing was much better than Diego's. Like, yeah, his father was emotionally abusive, but at least his father wasn't trying to kill him or rape his mom or something. But also it compares the two, that even though they both had terrible fathers that were treating them poorly, Johnny ended up not becoming like Diego. Diego becomes more of an antagonist. I don't know if I would call him a villain necessarily for most of the part, but he's an antagonist. He's definitely not as morally straight as a hero would be. And he's always concerned with just furthering his own goals. That's kind of who Diego is. It's all about getting to point B from point A, no matter how it happens. Whereas Johnny, he of course wants to further his own goals too, but he's not willing to sacrifice the good in order to do that. He's not going to sacrifice his morals just to get to point B. And so it's an interesting question, something to think about. Why does Johnny turn out the way why does Johnny turn out that way and Diego turns out a different way, even though they both had upbringings where their father figure had failed them? I think it comes down to the individuality of each person and how they decided to internalize how their fathers treated them. Diego kind of acts as though he's angry that he had to go through that. He's angry at the world for having to put him through that. Whereas Johnny doesn't want it to hold him back. He wants to get on with life and put it behind him. In fact, in a little bit of a flashback, we see that Johnny was going down the same path as Diego until he got shot, and it totally changed his, and became crippled, obviously paralyzed from the waist down, totally changed how he viewed reality and knew that he couldn't let the past hold him back, even though, because of the depression and other things, it still does to an extent, but he doesn't want it to. He doesn't want to let it hold him back. That's very different than Diego, who just does let it hold him back, whether he knows it or not. And finally, the last character from Steel Ball Run I want to point out is Valentine, the main villain of the part. Obviously, how you can probably think off right top of your head how his father impacted him. He never even knew his father. He was just told that his father was this great patriot who died for the country and left behind this little, I think it was like a napkin. And Valentine is imparted with these ideas of justice, patriotism, and heroism from his father, from his late father. And in a sense, Valentine definitely internalizes that and sees it as, this is how I need to live. That's how my father lived. Now I need to live that way. This makes him actually the opposite of all the other characters in the part, Gyro, Johnny, and Diego. All three of them living a life where they say, I don't want to be like my father. Whereas Valentine says, no, I want to be exactly like my father. The other three characters try to distance themselves from their fathers, while Valentine, he tries to become closer and closer to this idea of fatherhood. And he even starts to compare and merge fatherhood with nationalism, with his country, seeing the country as the father. But we'll get more into that in a second. First, I want to point out another character, not from, well, he makes appearance in Steel Ball Run, but he's not from Steel Ball Run. That would be Jesus of Nazareth, who also had a father, the Father, God. Jesus' relationship with his father is a whole lot different than the other characters. Jesus, in a sense, has the perfect father. And that's actually really important to understanding this part. Like Gyro's dad, Jesus' father is respectful. But unlike Gyro's dad, Jesus' father is emotionally attached to his son, Jesus. Like Valentine's dad, God is honorable, but he's also present, unlike Valentine's dad. Valentine's dad was honorable, but not present. Which again, is something that happens in real life. There are kids who had fathers who were great people, but weren't actually present in their lives. Think of like presidents or famous people, great people who are known and beloved by the world, but because they're so famous, they don't really have time to be at home actually being a parent. God, however, because he's God, he's able to be God, as in incredibly the most famous being to ever live. Everybody knows him, yet he can still be present in Jesus' life completely. He's not distracted or elsewhere. Jesus' dad is empowering, supportive, and perfectly loving. And the reason why I say this is important to understand for the part is because Jesus himself is important to understand for the part. All of these characters, in one way or the other, that I have just listed in Still Ball Run, are attempting to find the corpse parts of Jesus for different reasons. And how they get involved with it, I think, is connected to their relationships with their fathers, interestingly enough. Oceaniz made a video on JoJo's Part 7 and Fatherhood that kind of inspired me to talk about this a little bit more in detail. And I'll put a link in that description. In that video, he says that these characters were empowered by their fathers, either negatively or positively. And in the same way, they get empowered literally by the corpse parts. Gyro and Johnny, they want to distance themselves from their fathers, but whether they know it or like it or not, they are still empowered by them in a sense. They still live their lives having been affected by their fathers, and their lives are different because of it. No matter how much you want to distance yourself from your father, you have been affected by them, and you can't change that. You can't just go back in time and change that effect. You are a different person because of them, and that's just the way that it is. Similarly, Gyro and Johnny they don't enter the race searching for the corpse parts, but they end up getting involved in it anyway and looking for the corpse parts anyway and getting them. Similarly to how with their fathers, they aren't looking to be like their fathers, but slowly kind of are changed by them anyway, even though they want to be distanced from them. Valentine, who wants to be like his father, who wants to be this kind of perfect patriotic father figure, is looking for all the corpse parts of Jesus to integrate into his body so he can, in a sense, take on that fatherhood, that perfect fatherhood role that Jesus gets to experience. In fact, that link there is important. Jesus is this perfect son of the perfect father, something that Valentine obviously idealizes, even though his understandings of fatherhood and sonhood are different than a biblical understanding of them. But in a sense, I think he wants to seek out the corpse parts of Jesus and integrate into themselves so he can forcibly become Jesus, forcibly become the son, and have the perfect father. Even though that's not how that works. That's how his twisted mind seems to work. He wants to force the universe to identify him as Jesus so he can have the perfect father, even though he seems to identify that father as America as opposed to God. Diego, obviously, whether he knows it or not, is being negatively empowered by his father. In a sense, he's being controlled by his father because he's letting those terrible things that his father did to him control him and change how he sees the world, and instead of just forgiving and moving on, and which I know is not easy, but one of the reasons why it's something that you have to do is because if you don't, you let that person and the experiences they put you through control your life. And that's exactly where we find Diego. He's bitter and he's viciously goal-oriented, which can be a bad thing. And likewise, if he thinks the corpse parts are going to help him get to point B, then yeah, he's going to seek them out. Just like how, in a subconscious sense, if he believes how his father has treated him is going to empower him to reach his goal, then he'll let it embitter him. That's incredibly deep, and I could spend a lot of time talking about how that works mentally, but maybe a psychologist should take that up. Maybe I'm not qualified for that. So they're all seeking out the corpse parts of Jesus. And in a sense, it's almost as if these characters are seeking Jesus. I mean, they are, not in the biblical sense, but they're seeking to find Jesus, his corpse parts, which I think is really interesting considering that the Bible tells us that Jesus is the only way that we can get to the Father. Jesus says, no one comes to the Father except through me. These characters have broken relationships with their fathers in one way or another. All of them, I'm sure, whether they admit it or not, would like to have had a better relationship with their father. And in a sense, by seeking out the corpse parts, seeking out Jesus, they're trying to get to a place where they can either fix the relationship with their father or connect in some way with a bit bigger, better father figure. For Valentine, that better father figure is America, but biblically, it's supposed to be God. Perhaps it's not, I don't think it's necessarily what the characters are thinking, what they want to be doing, but thematically, I think it fits really well. And it actually pans out pretty well. The corpse part journey that these characters go on really does affect their relationships with their fathers, these characters. Diego ends up dying because of this, spoiler alert, but he does so as kind of a hero. He's fighting alongside a nun to stop Valentine from doing some pretty bad things in the name of the country. Even though Diego has been just this antagonist, this seemingly possibly evil or maybe going to become evil kind of a character, more of an anti-hero if you really want to say that, but he really dies a hero, a good guy. That's the opposite of who his father was. His father was willing to sacrifice others for his own sake, whereas Diego ends up sacrificing himself for other people. And that final act of his, I think, completely overwrites and kind of fixes all the damage that had been done to him by his father, because it shows that, at least on a subconscious level, he's come to terms with how his father has affected him and what he can do to break free from that effect that his father's had on him and start living his own life and be his own person, even if that unfortunately means instantly dying. Gyro actually is similar. He ends up dying from this journey as well. He does so, again, also dying for the sake of the world in this case. At this point, Valentine has already got the love train power. The world is in danger, literally, except for America, I suppose. Well, also America if Valentine's the president. But needless to say, the future is not looking good if Valentine gets to keep this power. And for most people, that's not good. But Gyro dies to stop that, which is something his father... Let's dig into this for a second. His father was an executioner who worked for the government of Italy, or for Naples. And there's a link here between how his father saw happiness in the commitment to his family's job as an executioner for the government, and Johnny dying to go against the government and to be apart from his family. Gyro's rebelliousness ends up helping the world. And it's not, in a sense, it's not because rebellious is good, it's just because he was rebelling against something that was bad. A little bit of a nuance there, but we're told at the end of the part that Gyro's family finds out that Gyro died, and interestingly enough, we're told they leave Naples, which I feel like a lot of people read that and just kind of move on. They don't realize how huge that is. We're talking about a family of people who for generations have seen their work for the government to be meaning in life, and they left that. Gyro's death had an insane impact on these people, including his dad, who might have been still alive at the time, probably was still alive, I think. I literally cannot imagine how his father must have felt about that. But clearly, it had an impact on him. Finds out his son is dead and died, like, saving the world, and decides to kind of get
take another look at his life and think about what's really important, and leaves the job that he's always been a part of, showing some sentimentality. And of course, there's Johnny, the one affected the most by this journey. I could talk about Valentine. We know how he's affected. He gets the love chain power and all that, and his view of America as fatherhood ends up not helping him, because since his idea of fatherhood is idealistic and not realistic, it doesn't really come in to help him when he's on the ropes. Johnny, as we know, his idea of fatherhood is more realistic than idealistic, and it clashes with Valentine's. In a sense, Araki is telling us that a terrible dad that's real is still better than an idealistic, fake dad that's perfect in every way but doesn't actually exist. Which is an interesting point, but I want to interject here for a second that there's a third option that's even better than both. That being God and his fatherhood to us. Because he's both real and this idealistic perfection, which is a big deal. It's like the best of both worlds. You get a dad who really does exist, who's really there, and is also perfect in every way. Johnny also, as we find out at the end of part 7 and a little bit in part 8, he becomes a father himself and dies to save his child. I mean, very different than his father. That he would love his child so much to sacrifice himself for that child. Johnny becomes a pretty great dad. But unfortunately, in a sense, Johnny becomes very similar to Valentine's dad. He dies for his child, which is honorable and awesome, but then he's not present for that child's life. And that's going to affect how his child views fatherhood. He probably didn't become uber nationalist like Valentine, but the point still remains. Our idea of fatherhood is fundamentally shaped by our fathers that we personally had in our life. And no matter who you are, whoever you are watching this, you had a flawed father. I did, everyone does. Everyone's got a flawed father because our fathers are human, and humans are flawed. And if you're a man and you're going to have kids, or you do have kids, you also are or will be a flawed father. You can try your best. You can try as hard as you can to be a great father. You're going to be flawed. It's just how it is. But God is not a flawed father. And because our ideas of fatherhood are shaped by the fathers in our life, our ideas of fatherhood are going to be flawed. We might become bitter and see fatherhood as a terrible thing because we were negatively impacted by our male parental figures. We might see it as this great honorable thing that's to be pursued because we had such great fathers, and we pursue it to such an extent it becomes like an idol in a sense. It takes over our life when it's not meant to be the only thing dictating your life's choices. But there's a silver lining here. If we start assigning our fatherhood to God, if we start seeing him as our father, then suddenly our ideas of fatherhood start to change, because our ideas of fatherhood being based on the fathers in our life, if our father is God, we start to get closer and closer to the perfect view of fatherhood. And we can have God as our father. The Bible tells us that when we become Christians, when we accept Jesus, that God adopts us into his family and views us as his children. Maybe you've heard the phrase that we're all children of God. That's half true. Christians are children of God according to the Bible, but nobody else is. They can if they want to, because God can adopt anyone he wants to, but they aren't yet. So some of us are children of God, but not literally everybody. Not yet anyway. God says, "And I will become a father to you," in reference to us when we accept Jesus. And I think that's incredibly important and a little overlooked in today's world, in today's Christianity. We don't tend to understand how important it is that God of all creation is our personal Father, our Heavenly Father, as a lot of people like to say. And it's not just important because it changes how we view fatherhood in general for the better, and which is especially important for men who want to be fathers, because if you've got a right view of fatherhood, that's going to really help you be a father. But it's more important than that. There are a lot of people who grew up with terrible fathers that really negatively empowered them, or just didn't empower them at all, I suppose, to kind of break from that. Think about people like Johnny, who were thrown into this life of depression and are abandoned by their fathers. Look at people like Johnny, who feel trapped and imprisoned by the rules that their father's always putting on them, and they just want to be free from that. Think about people like Valentine, who had seemingly a great father, but because he wasn't present, his idea of fatherhood was kind of shaped by himself. He got to decide what fatherhood was because there was no father around to tell him what it was. Or, of course, people like Diego, maybe somebody that you can sympathize with, somebody who had such an abusive father that all they want to do is just not be like that father, distance themselves, and they just hate fatherhood in general because of it, because of that experience. Their lives become instantly changed in such a monumental way when people like that accept Jesus and are adopted by the perfect father. A father who, like I said before, is honorable, emotionally supportive, respectful, perfectly loving. That is immensely important for a lot of people, especially people who just don't have dads. No matter how old you get, I think you always, there's this part of us that just really want to have this parental figure in our life. Someone just, even if you're ancient, like 90, 100 years old, you still in your heart, you want somebody looking down on you and protecting you and caring for you like a parent would. God treats us like he would children, like parents treat children. That's why so many analogies to the Bible and to how God does things are parents and their children. I myself, maybe you know this, I mentioned it in another video, I lost my dad half a year ago, and it's so important to me and meaningful to me that my earthly father is dead, but I still have a heavenly father. I still have a father. He still loves me. He's still present in my life. I don't have to be without fatherly love, and neither do you. The only question is, are you ready to accept that fatherly love into your life? Which I think we both know we need. Now I want to point out how these characters and how they dealt with their fathers, how we can learn from that. Like Valentine, we should consider God's fatherhood something to be grasped. What I mean by that is Valentine understood, in a sense, that there is such thing as a perfect fatherhood. There is such thing as a fatherhood that we should strive to be subject to, and we need to seek that out and get a hold of it. Of course, Valentine went about it all the wrong way. He tried to force being a son of God. But we don't have to force it. We can just accept Jesus and get it for free. But that is to say, that's because we believe in a real God, who is God, or I should say, we believe in God as the Father, not our countries as the Father. A lot of nationalistic tendencies actually really do in real life see their country as a parent figure, whether it's a mother or a father, which I think is really interesting from a Christian perspective, because that shows our need to want a higher parent figure, a physical earthly parent figure. We want something bigger than that to be dictating our lives. But we can have something better that's like that, but better, in actual God. But it's so like us humans to reject God and try and forcibly get something that's worse than him when we can just have God. That's humans for you. But unlike Valentine, we've also got to be humble. We can't just assume we're a part of God's family, or that we can force our way into God's family by doing good things. We have to be humble and realize that the only entranceway to God's family is by accepting Jesus and understanding that we couldn't enter God's family without Jesus, without what Jesus did for us. Jesus tore the veil and allowed us into his family. Without him, there would be no way to become a child of God. Like Gyro, we should respect our earthly fathers and try to learn from them. Even if they're terrible people, even if they're just terrible, terrible people, we should still respect them. That's something that the Bible commands us to do, in the Ten Commandments, actually. And there's A lot of people don't understand that. Why should I respect someone who's abusive? But ultimately, I think it lends to the point that we should just be respectful people in general. As the Bible points out, even terrible, evil people love those who love them. It takes an amazing person to love and respect those that hate them. So like Gyro, we should respect our fathers, but not let them control us. We are still our own individuals, and we have our own lives to live that aren't burdened by the plans our parents have for us. A lot of people, especially in non-American cultures, live in a world where their parents just get to decide what their lives are going to look like. Well, that's not right. God decides what our lives get to look like, but also, to a lesser extent, you decide what your life gets to look like. And if you disagree with your parents, that's okay. It's possible to respectfully disagree with them. And the way that you go about doing that is, instead of just rebelling like Gyro, is not just rebelling like Gyro, so to speak, but having person-to-person conversations with your parents, showing them either biblically or factually why you need to be in control of your life. And like Johnny, we should seek to become the best fathers that we can be, or best parents that we can be, but we should also hope for a better relationship and a restoration of relationship with our own fathers if they've been broken. I'm sure Johnny never expected his father to repent and apologize and believe that what he'd done was wrong, but that's what we see happened. Johnny's father, George, really does realize that he was wrong, and I have no doubt that after Part 7 ends, he and Johnny reconnect and restore that relationship. If you've had a terrible father, or just a father who's not been perfect, which is true for all of us, hope that there can be change there, because there can be, whether you think it's possible or not. Anything is possible with God. Don't think that you're just doomed to have an awful father forever, because in a sense, you and that person are both subject to God the Father, like children. And God can mediate that just like a parent can mediate his two kids when they have a fight. And like all of these characters, we should also go on a journey to seek out Jesus, just in a different way than they did. They went on a journey to find Jesus' mummified body. We should go on a journey to find Jesus' living and breathing, true being. If you've had a broken relationship with your father or anything like that, go on a journey to seek out Jesus, seek out God, seek out the true Father. Is that journey going to be hard? Yeah, it very well might be. For a lot of people around the world throughout history, it has been. And yeah, for some people that journey does end in death. But it's a journey we all should go on. We all have to go on. And it's a journey where if we do find Jesus, then it's a journey that doesn't end. The journey, in a sense, only ends if you fail to go on the journey. But if you do make those steps towards Jesus, I think those steps will never stop. And you'll keep on walking into the future forever with Jesus and with a perfect, loving Father. So if that idea of a perfect Father is in any way speaking to you, this is your wake-up call to go about finding it, because you actually can. And that's a big deal. So my conclusion is, yes, we can become children of God. We don't have to force it, and we don't have to imbue corpse parts into our bodies in order to get that far. But what is fatherhood to begin with? Like I had pointed out at the beginning, what even is fatherhood? Is it just the position of being a dad? Is it an act of parental love, or is it more than that? Is it something spiritual? Is it a blessed role to mimic God? Let me know what you think fatherhood is. And as always, thank you for watching. If there's a topic you'd like me to cover, let me know. But keep that discussion going. With or without me. I hope this video has helped you to understand a little bit more about God as a father and why that's important. Thank you. And if it has, thank God.